After 56 years, Bruce Dern has finally broken his silence, revealing the truth he kept hidden for decades about Diane Ladd. A truth that changes everything we thought we knew about their story. In the heart of Laurel, Mississippi, a small town wrapped in the heat of the Deep South, a little girl once stood on a dirt road and made a promise to herself. That one day she would be seen. Not just noticed, not just admired, but truly seen. Her heart, her fire, her pain. That little girl was Diane Ladd, and though she was born far from the bright lights of Hollywood, her spirit already burned with cinematic intensity. Her story is one of grit and grace, of beauty and heartbreak. A journey that would carry her from dusty southern stages to Oscar podiums and back into the depths of human emotion. Because for Diane Ladd, acting was never about fame, it was about truth. Raw, unfiltered, and deeply human. Laurel, Mississippi in the 1930s was not a place where dreams of stardom seemed possible. It was a quiet town of red clay roads, church bells, and magnolia trees where people lived by faith and hard work. Diane's family was modest, yet their home was filled with laughter, storytelling, and a belief that imagination could take you anywhere, even beyond the horizon. From an early age, Diane was different. While other children played with dolls, she was staging impromptu performances for neighbors, transforming her front porch into a theater. Her parents saw that spark. The same kind of spark that separates dreamers from doers, and though times were tough, they encouraged her to follow it. But the world wasn't built to make it easy for a girl from Laurel to become a star. There were no connections, no mentors, no silver spoons. Only the stubborn, radiant belief that if she worked hard enough, someone somewhere would notice. And so began her lifelong dance with ambition, a delicate, sometimes painful pursuit of something bigger than herself. As Diane grew older, her fascination with acting deepened. She wasn't content with surface emotions or pretty lines. She wanted to understand people from the inside out. Every character she studied, every monologue she read, became a doorway into another soul. She studied acting with a hunger that astonished her teachers. It wasn't about applause, it was about truth. The kind of truth that sits heavy in your chest when the curtain falls. When she finally left Mississippi to chase her dream, she entered a world that was both dazzling and cruel. The theater world in the mid-20th century was dominated by men, by tradition, by politics. A young Southern woman with ambition was often underestimated or dismissed entirely. But Diane Ladd refused to be invisible. In audition after audition, she brought something raw that couldn't be ignored. Casting directors saw it immediately. That unpredictable blend of tenderness and steel. She could make an audience weep with a single glance or tremble with the quiet fury of a woman betrayed. She wasn't playing at emotion, she was living it. And as she moved from stage to screen, the world began to notice. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, Hollywood was changing. The old studio system was fading, and a new generation of filmmakers wanted authenticity, depth, and chaos. It was the perfect storm for an actress like Diane Ladd. Her performances began to carve their way into the consciousness of audiences who were hungry for something real. She didn't fit neatly into Hollywood's molds. She wasn't the glamorous blonde bombshell, nor the silent, suffering wife. She was complex, unpredictable, a woman who could hold heartbreak and humor in the same breath. When she appeared in Chinatown, 1974, directed by Roman Polanski, her performance hinted at the emotional depth that would soon define her career. But it was Alice Does Live Here Anymore, directed by Martin Scorsese that same year, that made her unforgettable. In Alice, she played Flo, a brash, warm, complicated waitress who helped another woman find her voice. It was a supporting role, but Diane filled it with electricity. Every line, every gesture felt alive. The Academy noticed too. Her performance earned her an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actress. For the girl from Laurel, it was validation, not just from Hollywood but from the universe itself. But success, as Diane would soon learn, always carries a price. Behind the applause, Diane's personal life was marked by both love and loss. She married actor Bruce Dern in 1960, and together they became one of the most talented and passionate couples in the industry. Their home was full of creative energy. And soon, their daughter, Laura Dern, would carry that legacy forward in her own right. Yet the marriage was turbulent. Two artists, both ambitious, both driven, can sometimes burn too brightly together. They supported each other's careers but struggled to balance fame with family. The pressures of Hollywood, combined with personal tragedy, including the heartbreaking loss of a child, left emotional scars that time would never fully erase. Diane once said in an interview that the pain of life teaches you how to act. For her, acting became not just a career but a form of survival, a way to transform grief into art. She learned to channel everything, love, anger, sorrow, into her performances, and audiences could feel it. Every time she appeared on screen, there was a sense that she was showing us not just a character, but a piece of her own soul. In an industry obsessed with youth and trends, Diane Ladd refused to be forgotten. While many actresses struggled to find meaningful roles past a certain age, Diane kept reinventing herself, with intelligence, grace, and an almost spiritual resilience. She appeared in Wild at Heart 1990, directed by David Lynch, a filmmaker known for his surreal, dreamlike worlds. Her performance as Marietta Fortune, the obsessive mother of Laura Dern's character, was both terrifying and tragic. It earned her another Oscar nomination nearly 2 decades after her first. But the most powerful part of that film wasn't on screen, it was what it represented. A mother and daughter playing mother and daughter, both at the height of their creative power. It was as if life and art had merged for Diane and Laura. 2 generations of women, bound by blood and storytelling, creating something larger than themselves. In interviews, Diane spoke about how proud she was of Laura, not just as an actress but as a person. There was no competition, only admiration. They became a symbol of generational artistry, proof that the fire of creativity could be passed down like a sacred torch. Diane Ladd's story is not just about acting, it's about endurance. For decades, she faced a business that often sidelines women once their youth fades. But Diane never accepted invisibility. She continued to act, in film, television, and theater, not because she needed the attention, but because she needed the expression. Her later roles in shows like Chesapeake Shores and Enlightened brought her to new audiences and reminded the world that great storytelling has no expiration date. Her performances were quieter, more contemplative, but no less powerful. You could see in her eyes the weight of everything she'd lived through. The triumphs, the losses, the wisdom that only time can give. And beyond acting, Diane became a writer, director, and producer, determined to tell stories that mattered. Her work often focused on themes of love, redemption, and human connection, stories that reflected her own journey toward peace. It's rare for an artist to leave a legacy that is both personal and universal. Diane Ladd has done just that. Her life reminds us that greatness doesn't come from perfection, it comes from persistence, from daring to stay vulnerable in a world that rewards masks, from taking the pain life gives you and turning it into something beautiful. She showed the world that strength can coexist with softness, that success means nothing without soul, and that even the hardest hearts can be touched by truth. For generations of actors, especially women, Diane became a guiding light, a reminder that you don't have to play by Hollywood's rules to matter, you just have to be honest. Today, when Diane Ladd and her daughter Laura Dern appear together, there's a visible tenderness. A bond forged not just in family, but in art, survival, and mutual respect. Their story mirrors something universal, the idea that the most powerful legacies are the ones built on love and resilience. When Diane faced a serious health challenge in recent years, Laura spoke publicly about how it changed their relationship. They began walking together every day, talking, remembering, healing. Those walks became the heart of their joint memoir, Honey, Baby, Mine, a title inspired by a lullaby Diane used to sing to Laura as a child. It's a story not about fame, but about connection. About how a mother and daughter learn to see each other not just as family, but as women with their own stories, scars, and dreams. In many ways, Diane's journey came full circle, from a little girl in Mississippi who longed to be seen, to a woman whose truth touched millions. Diane Ladd's brilliance lies not in her fame, but in her presence. She doesn't dominate the screen with volume or spectacle, she does it with stillness. Her performances breathe. You feel the tension between her silence and her words. It's as if she's constantly balancing the storm within her, allowing only glimpses to escape. That's what makes her so unforgettable. She once said, "An actor is a servant of humanity. We're here to show people themselves." And through her characters, from waitresses and mothers to lost souls and dreamers, she has done exactly that. Her art reminds us that vulnerability is not weakness, it's strength in its purest form. Looking back over 9 decades, Diane Ladd's life reads like a symphony, with movements of triumph and tragedy, quiet interludes of reflection, and crescendos of emotion that echo through generations. She's been a pioneer for women in Hollywood, a mentor to countless young actors, and an artist whose commitment to truth never wavered. But above all, she has remained human, flawed, compassionate, endlessly curious. And maybe that's the secret. Maybe the reason Diane Ladd's performances stay with us is because they remind us of ourselves, fragile yet strong, heartbroken yet hopeful, imperfect yet striving toward something divine. In a world that often rewards the loudest voices, Diane Ladd built her legacy through quiet power. From the dusty roads of Mississippi to the soundstages of Hollywood, she has walked a path carved by courage. She showed that true artistry isn't about fame or fortune, it's about truth. The truth of who we are, the truth of what we feel, and the truth that even through pain, beauty can rise. Diane Ladd once said, "We all have stories inside us. The trick is to tell them before time runs out." And she did, with grace, with fire, and with eyes that still hold the weight of every story she's ever lived. Across town, another soul was rising. His eyes carried both danger and sadness, the kind of eyes that seemed to have seen too much even before the world had taken notice. His name was Bruce Dern, and from the very beginning, he was never meant to fit neatly into anyone's picture of Hollywood. If Diane Ladd was the emotional architect, building worlds with her eyes, Bruce was the outlaw, the drifter, the man on the margins who made imperfection magnetic. From coming home to Nebraska from the Cowboys to the Hateful Eight, Bruce Dern carved out a career that defied predictability. He wasn't a conventional leading man. He wasn't the hero who saved the day. He was something far rarer, the man who told the truth even when it hurt. And that truth, his raw, unfiltered humanity, would make him one of the most distinctive actors in American cinema. Bruce MacLeish Dern was born on June 4, 1936 in Chicago, Illinois, not exactly a birthplace associated with Hollywood dreams. He came from a family of influence, intellect, and expectation. His grandfather was George Dern, the former governor of Utah and Secretary of War under President Franklin D. Roosevelt. His godfather, none other than Adlai Stevenson, the two-time Democratic presidential nominee. In short, Bruce was supposed to be a man of politics, of power, of respectability. But Bruce Dern was never built for that kind of life. From his earliest days, he was restless, a boy who couldn't stand the idea of being ordinary. Where others followed the rules, Bruce questioned them. He was athletic, fiercely competitive, and yet emotionally restless, as though something deep within him refused to be still. It wasn't rebellion for rebellion's sake, it was curiosity. He wanted to feel everything. He wanted to live at the edge of his nerves. And that impulse, that unwillingness to play life safe, would one day define both his art and his legacy. Bruce's introduction to acting wasn't glamorous, it was an accident of fate. While studying at the University of Pennsylvania, he stumbled into the world of theater and found, for the first time, something that made sense. Acting wasn't about memorizing lines for him. It was about diving headfirst into the mess of human emotion. When he moved to New York and joined the Actors Studio, he found his spiritual home. Under the guidance of Lee Strasberg, the legendary mentor to Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, and James Dean, Bruce learned what it meant to act from the inside out. The training was brutal, emotionally demanding, psychologically exposing, but Bruce thrived on it. He wasn't interested in glamour, he wanted honesty. And that honesty soon became his trademark. He would later say, "I never wanted to be liked on screen, I wanted to be understood." Those words defined the kind of career he would go on to build. One that refused to pander, one that demanded respect through authenticity. By the early 1960s, Bruce Dern had become a familiar face in the New York theater scene, performing alongside other young actors who would later become icons. But it was his move to Los Angeles that changed everything. Hollywood didn't know what to do with him at first. He wasn't handsome in the conventional sense, he didn't have the polished charm of a matinee idol, but what he did have was presence. That rare, unsettling energy that made audiences sit forward in their seats. Directors began to notice, so did Diane Ladd. It was sometime in the late 1950s when Bruce Dern crossed paths with Diane Ladd, a fiery Southern actress who, like him, was fueled by ambition and emotion in equal measure. Their meeting wasn't gentle or gradual, it was a collision of passion, intellect, and artistic hunger. Both were young actors trying to carve out a place in a city that didn't make room for outsiders. Diane was drawn to Bruce's fearlessness. Bruce was captivated by Diane's emotional depth. They argued, they challenged each other, they inspired one another, and before long they were inseparable. In 1960 they married, two artists bound not by convenience but by the thrill of possibility. Their union wasn't calm, but it was alive. They were each other's mirrors, reflecting both brilliance and vulnerability. And from that union came something extraordinary, Laura Dern, born in 1967. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, Bruce Dern became the face of a new kind of Hollywood man, one who didn't play it safe. He brought danger and depth to every role, whether as the unpredictable outsider or the broken everyman. In The Wild Angels 1966, opposite Peter Fonda, he rode motorcycles and embodied rebellion itself, long before it became fashionable. In The Cowboys 1972, he did the unthinkable. His character shot John Wayne. The scene caused outrage among audiences, but Bruce didn't apologize. "My job," he said, "is to make you feel something, even if that something is hate." And people did feel. Directors loved him because he brought something raw, something unscripted. You couldn't control Bruce Dern, you could only point the camera at him and hope to catch the lightning. He was never afraid to be unlikable because he understood something fundamental. The truth of human nature isn't always pretty. And yet beneath that rugged exterior, beneath the wild eyes and unpredictable performances, there was something unmistakably soulful. Bruce Dern's characters weren't monsters, they were men trying to survive their own chaos. The marriage between Bruce and Diane was filled with creativity and chaos. Two artists with that much passion rarely coexist without friction. They pushed each other, sometimes too hard. They argued, but they also elevated each other's craft. Diane once said, "When Bruce loved you, he loved you like a storm." They shared not only ambition but tragedy. The loss of their first daughter left a wound that never healed. It changed them both profoundly. Acting for them became more than a career. It became a refuge, a way to make sense of loss. By 1969, the marriage had burned itself out. But despite their separation, the bond between them never truly dissolved. They shared not just a past, but a purpose. And their daughter, Laura, would grow to carry that shared fire forward, the perfect fusion of both her parents' souls. The 1970s and 1980s were Bruce Dern's proving ground. He appeared in Silent Running, 1972, a haunting environmental sci-fi film that showcased his range, playing a man more comfortable with plants than people. In Coming Home, 1978, alongside Jane Fonda and Jon Voight, he delivered one of the most searing performances of his career, as a man broken by war, consumed by silence. That role earned him his first Academy Award nomination and cemented his reputation as one of the most fearless actors of his generation. Yet Bruce wasn't interested in fame. He never played the Hollywood game. He didn't chase blockbusters or polish his public image. He preferred characters who were flawed, haunted, and human. He once said, "Hollywood loves winners, I love the losers. They're the ones who tell the truth." And that's who Bruce became, Hollywood's poet of the outsiders. As the years went on, Bruce could have faded quietly into character roles. But he didn't. Instead, he continued to reinvent himself. In the 1980s, he appeared in cult classics like The Burbs 1989 and Black Sunday 1977, proving he could blend intensity with humor. And while many of his contemporaries slowed down, Bruce only seemed to deepen. Behind the scenes, he lived quietly, often preferring solitude to celebrity events. He trained daily, staying physically and mentally sharp even as he aged. He believed in endurance, not just in body but in spirit. Then, in 2013, at the age of 77, Bruce Dern gave what many critics called the performance of his lifetime. In Alexander Payne's Nebraska. Playing Woody Grant, an aging man convinced he's won $1 million, Bruce brought all his life experience to the role. The stubbornness, the heartbreak, the hope that refuses to die. It was a masterclass in understatement. No theatrics, no pretension, just truth. And for that truth, he received his second Oscar nomination, this time for Best Actor. It wasn't a comeback, it was a coronation. Recognition of a man who had always been there, quietly redefining what acting could be. Bruce Dern has always approached acting with a kind of monk-like devotion. He said that the greatest gift an actor can give is vulnerability without apology. He doesn't chase perfection, he chases honesty. He prepares meticulously, often creating entire backstories for his characters. Memories, fears, habits that may never appear on screen but give him emotional truth. He's been known to improvise lines that pierce the soul because he believes that real emotion can't be scripted. And while his reputation in early Hollywood was that of a maverick, those who know him describe him as generous, loyal, and deeply sensitive. A man who listens more than he speaks, who still believes that art can heal. He's often said that he learned more from failure than success. Every rejection, every heartbreak became material. That's where the good stuff comes from, he once joked. The pain, the stuff you wish didn't happen. It's a philosophy that has guided his entire life. That truth, no matter how ugly, is beautiful when you're brave enough to face it. When Laura Dern took the stage at the Oscars in 2020 to accept her award for Marriage Story, she thanked both her parents, calling them my heroes. It was more than sentiment, it was history coming full circle. Diane Ladd and Bruce Dern had once been the struggling dreamers, unsure if their art would ever mean something. Now their daughter stood on the world's biggest stage, carrying their names and their legacy to new heights. Behind her tears and smile were decades of love, loss, and survival. Bruce watched proudly, knowing that whatever else life had taken, it had given him something eternal, a daughter who understood his soul. Today, Bruce Dern is in his late 80s, but you'd never know it by his schedule. He continues to act, appearing in films with Quentin Tarantino like The Hateful Eight and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. His face now carries the map of a life fully lived, every wrinkle a story, every scar a memory. He is, in many ways, the last of his kind. An actor who never chased celebrity, who never played it safe, who believed that vulnerability was strength. When asked what keeps him going, Bruce once said, "Because I'm not done telling the truth yet." That truth, raw, imperfect, and human, remains his greatest gift. Bruce Dern has lived many lives, on screen and off. He's played killers, dreamers, soldiers, drifters, but underneath them all is the same restless heart. He never wanted to be the hero. He wanted to be real. And that's what made him unforgettable. In a town built on illusion, Bruce Dern built a career on authenticity. In a business obsessed with youth, he aged like a poet. And in a world that often rewards conformity, he stayed a rebel, not out of defiance but out of devotion to truth. Maybe that's why his story still resonates, because Bruce Dern reminds us that strength isn't about control, it's about courage. The courage to be flawed, to be misunderstood, to be human. He is the outlaw with a soul, the man who turned rebellion into art and left behind a trail of truth that generations of actors will follow. And somewhere out there, the camera still finds him. That same wild glint in his eyes, that same quiet storm beneath the surface, reminding us that even after all these years, Bruce Dern is still chasing what he always wanted. Not perfection, but truth. Even after the divorce, the thread between them never snapped. It stretched and shifted, sometimes pulled thin by time, sometimes glowing faintly in the background of their separate lives, but it never truly vanished. You could see it in the way they spoke about Laura, their daughter, and their living bridge. Every award she won, every performance that stirred an audience carried echoes of both of them. Diane's emotional precision, Bruce's fearless honesty. Through her, they were still in conversation, still creating something together, even when miles apart. When the world looked at Laura Dern, it saw the best of both her parents, the empathy of her mother, the unpredictability of her father, and perhaps that was why Diane and Bruce could never quite drift into the category of ex-spouses. They had become something else, two chapters in the same unfinished story. Diane, strong and wise, often met questions about her past with humor, the kind that hides a tender truth behind a laugh. She once joked Bruce wasn't a great husband, but he's a really great actor. The audience laughed and so did she, but her eyes told another story, a softer one. There was affection there, the kind that doesn't ask for reconciliation, only understanding. Because love like theirs doesn't always end, it changes shape. It matures into something quieter, not passion, not partnership, but recognition. Recognition of the shared struggle. Recognition of the years spent chasing dreams side by side. Recognition that no one else could ever fully know what it meant to be them during those wild, early Hollywood years. Bruce, on the other hand, was never one to dwell on the past. He rarely spoke about their marriage in interviews, not out of bitterness but out of reverence, as though the story between them was sacred, too complex to reduce to anecdotes or nostalgia. But every now and then, a question would draw a faint smile from him. A flicker of memory would cross his face, that mischievous, haunted half-smile that seemed to carry 1,000 untold stories. And when he finally did speak, it was without resentment. He said once quietly, "Diane was the first person who really believed I could do this. She made me brave." Those words, simple and unadorned, carried decades of emotion. They were an acknowledgement, not of a marriage lost, but of a foundation built. Because beneath all the years, the roles, and the fame, there remained a truth neither of them could escape. They had shaped each other. Diane had taught Bruce the discipline of feeling, the art of vulnerability. Bruce had taught Diane the beauty of risk, the courage to leap without a net. And even though life carried them in different directions, their respect for one another aged gracefully, like an old photograph that still feels alive. They stood in the same rooms again, at film festivals, at Laura's premieres, at awards ceremonies, and each time the crowd saw not tension but tenderness, the kind of quiet acknowledgement shared by two people who had once built a world together and who still, in some invisible way, kept its light burning. That thread, visible through Laura, invisible through respect, became their lasting connection. It wasn't the thread of romance or nostalgia, but of gratitude. Gratitude for the years that shaped them. Gratitude for the lessons that cost so much. Gratitude for the fact that, in the unpredictable story of two artists trying to survive fame and failure, they had found something unbreakable. And though Bruce seldom looked back when he finally did, his voice carried both warmth and wonder. "We were kids," he said. "We had no idea what was coming, but somehow we made something that still matters." It was a rare admission, one that summed up the quiet truth of their bond. They had outgrown love as it was, but not the respect that love had built. Even now, when the world speaks of Diane Ladd and Bruce Dern, it's not in the past tense. It's as though their connection still lives somewhere in the air between them. In their daughter's laughter, in the echoes of old film reels, in the subtle way they still speak each other's names with care. Because some stories don't end with separation. They end with understanding. And understanding in the long run can be its own kind of love. After Diane's passing at the age of 89, Bruce Dern finally broke his silence. In a statement filled with tenderness, he said, "Diane was a tremendous actress, a hidden treasure, until David Lynch showed the world her brilliance. But then came the moment that caught everyone off guard. His voice, usually steady, softened. She was a wonderful mother to our incredible daughter, Laura, and for that I will be forever grateful." This wasn't just a tribute, it was a confession, an acknowledgement that despite time, separation, and pain, love had never truly left. Bruce's words carried the weight of decades, a lifetime of reflection, of missed moments, of gratitude only realized when it's almost too late. He didn't just honor her talent, he revealed his enduring admiration, the truth that even after all those years apart, Diane Ladd remained the woman who shaped his heart, his art, and the soul of their daughter. Diane Ladd's legacy lives on, not only in her films or her 3 Oscar nominations, but in the light that shines through her daughter, Laura Dern, who once said, "Some say never meet your heroes, but if you're lucky, you get them as your parents." And Bruce Dern, the man who once stood beside her and now stands alone, continues to honor her not through tears but through truth. Because sometimes, love doesn't need a perfect ending. It just needs to be remembered exactly as it was.